The chandelier above the Montgomery dining room glittered like a halo around their wealth. Expensive crystal, gilded frames, and the aroma of truffle oil, everything screamed power, privilege, and entitlement. But none of it intimidated Ava Johnson. At 36, she had built Novalink Technologies from a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn into a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. Today, she walked into the Montgomery mansion to discuss a $900 million merger. A deal that could skyrocket her company if she survived the arrogance and subtle venom waiting for her at the table. Charlotte Montgomery, sipping her Pinot Noir, whispered to her brother, "Do you really think she's capable?" Her laughter was light, but her disdain was sharp. Edward Montgomery, the patriarch, leaned back in his chair. "Well, she's ambitious, I'll give her that. But ambitious doesn't always equal smart." Ava smiled politely, letting their words wash over her. She had heard this all before: underestimation, microaggressions, outright mockery. But today, she held more than composure. She held the power to destroy them with a single decision. "Miss Johnson," Edward said, voice dripping with condescension, "we're curious how someone like you even envisions running a company of our scale." Ava met his icy gaze, calm but lethal. "I don't envision it. I do it. And by the end of this evening, you'll understand why." The room stiffened. The patriarch cleared his throat, the younger Montgomerys exchanged nervous glances, and even the waiter paused mid-step. Because Ava Johnson, the woman they had mocked, was about to teach a lesson they would never forget, and it wouldn't cost her anything but the dignity they had tried to strip away. Tonight, $900 million hung in the balance. But respect, that was priceless. Ava Johnson had received the invitation 3 weeks earlier, and the memory of it still lingered like a challenge she was meant to conquer. The envelope had been heavy, embossed with gold lettering, faintly smelling of ink and power, a scent that spoke of privilege accumulated over generations. Montgomery Industries was one of the oldest, most exclusive families in the United States, a dynasty built on manufacturing, influence, and wealth that had never needed to fight for relevance. And now, they wanted to meet her. She had studied the contents meticulously, a formal request for a meeting, an opportunity to discuss a potential merger worth $900 million, a number so vast it made the heart skip a beat. But Ava's pulse remained steady. She knew that old money rarely respected a woman of color, even if she had the skill to dominate the boardroom. And she had earned every inch of her success, rising from a cramped Brooklyn apartment with nothing but determination, brilliance, and grit. "Miss Johnson, Marcus, her assistant, said gently, placing the envelope on her glass desk, "they've been hemorrhaging money in their manufacturing division. They need us. More than they'll ever admit." Ava studied the envelope, running her fingertips over the embossed letters. Her mind raced through possibilities, risks, and the kind of boardroom theatrics that awaited her. "Exactly," she replied softly, a spark of determination in her eyes. "They need us more than we need them. That's power, Marcus. And power, when wielded correctly, changes everything." The drive to Connecticut felt symbolic, almost ritualistic. As she maneuvered her sleek black SUV through the ivy-covered gates of the Montgomery estate, the mansion appeared like a relic of the past, its stone facade covered in climbing ivy, its tall windows like eyes scrutinizing her every move. The driveway twisted upward, lined with European-inspired gardens that seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here." Yet Ava felt no fay. She had faced skeptical investors who laughed at her youth, engineers who doubted her vision, and board members who assumed she lacked experience. She had survived, thrived, and emerged stronger every time. Inside, the house exuded old-world opulence. Polished marble floors reflected chandeliers, paintings of pale ancestors stared down from gilded frames, and the faint smell of expensive perfume lingered in the air. The family gathered in the parlor, their designer smiles taut and rehearsed. Charlotte Montgomery, the youngest daughter with a laugh sharper than a scalpel, whispered to her brother with a smirk, "Is she the assistant?" Her words were meant to sting, and the subtle cruelty in her voice was palpable. Ava's smile remained polite but razor-sharp. "CEO of Novalink Technologies," she said clearly, each word deliberate, precise, and measured. The room shifted subtly. Some glanced at her with polite curiosity, others with barely concealed disdain. Edward Montgomery, the patriarch, stepped forward, extending a hand with a forced smile. "A pleasure, Miss Johnson. We've heard quite a story." "Yes," Ava replied, gripping his hand firmly, her gaze steady. "Stories are only compelling if they have a powerful ending." Dinner began, a parade of haute cuisine and subtle jabs disguised as compliments. Charlotte leaned slightly toward Ava, her tone syrupy but patronizing. "I'm surprised," she murmured. "You speak so well for someone in your position." Ava raised an eyebrow, sipping her water to maintain composure. Her voice was smooth but firm. "Education and determination can take you far, Charlotte. Farther than wealth inherited without effort." Edward interrupted mid-sentence more than once, dismissive in tone. "Our board prefers partners we understand," he said, gesturing vaguely. "Someone familiar." Ava's lips curved into a slight, confident smile. "Familiar in color, or familiar in culture?" The question landed like a hammer, precise, undeniable. For a moment, silence reigned. Charlotte's poised smirk faltered, Edward's face tightened, veins faintly pulsing at his temple. Ava felt the shift in the air. They had underestimated her, not just her intelligence, but her ability to command a room, to turn their arrogance against them. Marcus, seated beside her, shot a subtle glance of admiration. He knew that moment had marked a turning point. Ava's calmness wasn't just poise, it was power, quiet but unshakable. And by the end of the evening, she knew she would ensure that the $900 million deal went on her terms, not theirs. In that moment, Ava realized something crucial. She didn't need to fight to prove herself. She merely needed to exist in that room, fully aware of her worth, fully aware that the Montgomerys' laughter and mockery were irrelevant to the inevitable outcome. The boardroom belonged to her, and tonight they would learn the meaning of true respect. As the first course arrived, lobster bisque served in delicate porcelain bowls, the atmosphere thickened with subtle tension. The Montgomerys had perfected the art of polite cruelty. Each glance, each smirk, each whispered comment felt rehearsed, yet cutting. Charlotte Montgomery, perched elegantly in her designer gown, leaned slightly toward her brother with a smirk that dripped condescension. "Do you think she really understands high finance?" she asked, her tone meant for amusement, though the malicious undertone could not be ignored. Edward Montgomery, the patriarch, exhaled slowly, his hand brushing the stem of his crystal wine glass. "Clever, perhaps," he said, his words slow, deliberate, "but clever doesn't make you rich." Ava kept her eyes on her plate, seemingly calm, the porcelain bisque untouched for a moment. But inside, a storm raged. Every word, every glance, every carefully veiled insult hit like tiny needles, meant to provoke irritation, to weaken confidence. But Ava had learned early that reacting too quickly played into the hands of those who underestimated her. This dinner wasn't about humiliation, it was about strategy. She would observe, measure, and wait for the perfect moment to turn the table. The conversation continued with the usual thinly veiled jabs. Charlotte leaned back, twirling her diamond bracelet lazily around her wrist. "Honestly," she said, loud enough for Ava to hear, "I don't know how you let someone like this run a company. The board must have blind faith." Ava finally lifted her gaze, calm but incisive. Her eyes, steady and unyielding, locked with Charlotte's. "Actually, Charlotte," she said, her voice smooth, precise, and cutting without raising volume, "the board has complete faith. They've watched me turn a startup into a global powerhouse while ensuring innovation, efficiency, and diversity. And apparently, your family has had decades of inherited wealth, yet somehow manages to underestimate the world around you." Charlotte blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Her practiced smoke faltered as Edward's jaw tightened, a vein faintly pulsing at his temple. Even the butler, moving quietly to refill water glasses, paused to glance in Ava's direction, sensing the change in dynamics. Marcus, Ava's assistant, leaned slightly forward and whispered under his breath, "That was epic." Ava allowed herself a faint smile, controlled and confident. "Watch the rest unfold," she murmured, her voice carrying the velvet steel that made her presence undeniable. As the meal progressed to seared salmon and asparagus, the Montgomerys' arrogance only intensified. Each course was accompanied by pointed comments meant to provoke, subtle insinuations about her experience, her background, and even her very presence at the table. Charlotte's laughter, light and practiced, carried the weight of disdain. "Do you really think your company could survive without investors like us?" she asked, leaning slightly forward, as though demanding acknowledgement. Ava sipped her water slowly, her calmness a mask for the surge of determination beneath. "Our investors trust in our vision, Charlotte," she said evenly. "And sometimes that vision extends beyond old money and outdated perspectives." Edward's expression hardened, and Charlotte, sensing the ground shifting under her feet, tried a last attempt at humiliation. She gestured toward Ava's chair with a dismissive flick of her manicured hand. I hope you realize that no matter how much money you manage, we still run the real world. Ava leaned forward, voice low but sharp, her words cutting through the opulence of the room like a scalpel. Actually, Charlotte, she said, each word deliberate, measured, and heavy with intent, you've just given me every reason I need to walk out and cancel this deal. $900 million. Gone. Gone because your arrogance, your mockery, and your inability to recognize talent have made it impossible for us to collaborate. The room went dead silent. Edward's face flushed red with suppressed anger. Charlotte's mouth hung slightly open, eyes wide with shock. Their once commanding presence now felt fragile under the weight of Ava's calm authority. Even the servants, trained to blend into the background, felt the tension, their movements slowed in silent acknowledgement of the shift. Marcus's hand brushed against hers beneath the table, a subtle nod of approval, but Ava didn't flinch. She had turned humiliation into leverage. Every insult, every smack, every sneer had only strengthened her resolve. Tonight, she wasn't just protecting her company, she was demonstrating the undeniable truth that talent, vision, and integrity outweigh arrogance and inherited wealth. Ava leaned back, her posture perfect, her smile controlled. She had made her statement. The Montgomerys, who had come expecting a timid partner to charm or intimidate, now faced the reality of a CEO who demanded respect, not because of wealth, not because of charm, but because of proven power and intelligence. And in that silence, filled with unspoken tension, one fact became crystal clear. Ava Johnson didn't just survive the dinner, she owned it. The boardroom was massive, a cathedral of corporate power, its polished mahogany table reflecting the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Ava stepped inside with quiet confidence, the click of her heels on marble announcing her arrival. The Montgomerys and their top executives were already seated, papers and digital tablets spread before them like weapons in a skirmish. Each face turned as she entered, a mixture of curiosity, doubt, and barely concealed disdain. Edward Montgomery rose, clearing his throat. "Miss Johnson," he began, his voice tight, "we're eager to hear your final presentation. The board expects clarity." His words carried the weight of centuries of inherited arrogance, but Ava ignored the tension they intended to create. "Thank you," she said smoothly, placing her briefcase on the table and opening it. Her laptop hummed to life, projecting crisp charts and interactive diagrams onto the large screen. "Let's begin with what matters: efficiency, profitability, and future sustainability. Novalink's AI systems can increase your manufacturing output by 30% while reducing operational costs by nearly 40%. That's real, measurable growth, not speculation." Charlotte, sitting at the far end with her designer notebook poised, tilted her head and smirked. 30%, she said, incredulous. "Are we talking about the same numbers that would bankrupt our company if applied incorrectly?" Ava didn't flinch. Her calm, precise demeanor was a shield against their sneers. "These projections are based on 3 years of testing, real-world implementation, and careful auditing. You're right. If mismanaged, they could be disastrous. That's why you need someone experienced to implement them correctly." Her eyes locked with Edward's. "Someone like me." Edward leaned back, arms crossed. "Experience? You may run a tech company, but we're talking about the legacy of Montgomery Industries. Do you understand decades of infrastructure, of financial networks, of tradition?" Ava's smile was quiet, confident, and cutting. "I understand innovation. I understand results. And more importantly, I understand that legacy is meaningless if it doesn't adapt to survive. Your infrastructure is strong, but your mindset is fragile." A murmur ran through the room. Even the board members, handpicked to support Edward's vision, exchanged glances. They had been confident this meeting would be a formality, a demonstration of their superiority. Instead, they were watching a woman who was not only unshakable under scrutiny but dismantling their arguments with calm precision. Charlotte's voice rose, sharp and defensive. "You speak of adaptation and innovation, but this is our family business. How dare you suggest we're fragile?" Ava's tone didn't rise, but her words hit like a hammer. "Fragile is allowing arrogance to blind you to reality. Fragile is thinking that wealth alone can carry a company into the future. Your business isn't failing because of your products, it's failing because of your unwillingness to evolve." Edward's face tightened. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the crystal water glasses. "You will not speak to this family in that tone." Ava leaned forward, her voice steady, unwavering. "I'm not here to speak to the family. I'm here to speak to the board and the company. The $900 million merger is not about ego, it's about survival. And right now, what you need is someone who can lead you into the future, not someone who hides behind outdated traditions and mockery." A heavy silence followed. The Montgomerys had expected resistance, but not this. They had not prepared for the calm ferocity of a woman who refused to be intimidated, a CEO whose intelligence and presence demanded respect. Finally, Ava stood straight and closed her laptop. "Here's the reality," she said, letting the weight of her words sink into the room. "Novalink Technologies can take Montgomery Industries into the future safely and profitably, but only if we work with mutual respect. If I sense mockery, belittlement, or an inability to value expertise over ego, I will walk away. I will cancel this merger. $900 million. Gone. Because respect, competency, and vision are non-negotiable." Charlotte gasped. Edward's hand froze mid-air. The room seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, the Montgomerys were not in control. The board members shifted nervously, aware that the woman in front of them was not bluffing. Ava's eyes swept the room. Calm, poised, unyielding. "You have a choice," she continued. "Choose arrogance, choose outdated traditions, choose to mock talent, and the deal dies. Or choose progress, choose respect, choose results, and we succeed together." Edward's face turned crimson. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Charlotte looked as though she had seen a ghost. Ava smiled faintly, the fire behind her calm exterior evident to anyone paying attention. In that moment, the boardroom had shifted. The power dynamic had changed irrevocably. The Montgomerys had underestimated her, as they always did. And Ava Johnson knew, without a doubt, that she held the final move. The air in the boardroom had grown heavier with each passing moment. Ava Johnson's calm authority had shifted the balance of power, but the Montgomerys still clung to the illusion of control. Edward sat back in his chair, fists clenched, trying to mask the sting of her words. Charlotte fidgeted with her diamond bracelet, her smirk replaced with unease. The board members were silent, sensing that the evening had taken a turn none of them had expected. Ava remained standing, her posture impeccable, voice steady, unwavering. "I want to be very clear," she said, scanning the room with eyes that could pierce steel. "The $900 million merger is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about trust, vision, and respect. And so far, what I've witnessed here is the exact opposite." Edward opened his mouth, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. You have mocked me, questioned my experience, undermined my expertise, and treated this meeting as an opportunity to entertain yourselves at my expense. That tells me everything I need to know about how you conduct business and how you value the people who build your empire." Charlotte tried to interrupt. "That's—" "Charlotte," Ava said softly but with a precision that cut through the tension, "you will not speak. I'm not here to entertain insults or defend my right to exist in this room. I'm here to ensure the survival and growth of Montgomery Industries. But respect is non-negotiable. If it does not exist, this deal cannot exist either." She let the words hang in the air like a verdict. The Montgomerys' faces paled. Edward's fingers drummed nervously on the polished table, and Charlotte's hands trembled ever so slightly. The board members exchanged glances. It was clear they had underestimated her. Ava walked slowly to the end of the table, her heels clicking against the floor in deliberate rhythm. She pulled out a folder from her briefcase and placed it in front of Edward. "Here are the final projections, fully audited and verified. Everything you need to understand the impact Novalink can have on your operations. But let me be clear, implementing these plans requires cooperation, respect, and an open mind. Without those, the numbers mean nothing." Edward leaned forward, attempting to regain control. "You're threatening us," he said sharply. "You cannot just—" "I'm not threatening you," Ava interrupted, her voice calm yet lethal. "I'm offering you a choice. One path leads to progress, profits, and a future in which Montgomery Industries thrives. The other leads to stagnation, missed opportunities, and failure. Your actions will determine the outcome. And right now, your arrogance is pushing you dangerously close to the latter." Charlotte gasped, finally finding her voice. "How dare you speak to us like that? We owl." Ava raised a finger. "Silence. You've had your chance to mock me, to doubt me, to treat me as less than my credentials, my experience, and my results. Now, it's time for action. She turned to the board members. If any of you doubt that I can execute these strategies successfully, I will step out of this room, and the $900 million deal will be cancelled. I will not compromise, and I will not negotiate with disrespect. That is not arrogance, it is integrity. The tension was palpable. Even Edward's seasoned composure faltered as he realized that Ava's words were not idle threats. She had built Novalink from nothing. She had the power, the resources, and the credibility to walk away, and they all knew it. Ava's gaze swept the room one final time, making eye contact with every board member. You have been given a choice: respect and collaboration, or mockery and loss. The decision is yours, but remember this: talent and vision are not negotiable. Wealth alone cannot create success if it is paired with arrogance. For the first time that evening, Edward looked genuinely uncertain. Charlotte's defiance wavered into panic, and murmurs rippled through the board. Ava took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the impact of her words settle like a stone dropped into still water. She knew the power of silence. Let them absorb the weight of their behavior before making any move. Finally, she closed her briefcase with a click that sounded louder than any applause. I am prepared to leave now, she said, her calm authority radiating throughout the room. Consider this your last opportunity to demonstrate the respect this partnership demands. If you cannot, then we walk away, and this deal ends. Edward swallowed hard. The patriarch who had dominated boardrooms for decades was now quiet, the veneer of authority cracked. Charlotte's eyes darted nervously, the smoke gone, replaced with the first signs of genuine fear. The board members shifted in their seats, fully aware that the power dynamic had irreversibly shifted. Ava straightened, her head high, her gaze unwavering. I will give you until tomorrow morning, she said, her tone final, to decide if Montgomery Industries is ready to grow, or if you prefer to watch an opportunity of $900 million vanish. With that, she turned and walked out of the boardroom, heels clicking in measured rhythm, leaving the Montgomerys and their board stunned into silence. The turning point had arrived, she had delivered her verdict, and the consequences were imminent. The morning after the boardroom showdown, the Montgomery estate was a whirlwind of tension. Ava Johnson had left them with a simple ultimatum: respect and collaboration, or the $900 million deal vanished. By the time Edward Montgomery arrived at his office, his assistant was already shuffling papers nervously. Every memo, every spreadsheet, every projected figure seemed trivial compared to the weight of Ava's presence and the authority she wielded in that room the night before. Charlotte Montgomery paced the drawing room, her designer heels clicking harshly against the marble floor. I don't understand, she said, voice sharp but betraying panic. How could she speak to us like that? Who does she think she is? Edward's voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge of fear he hadn't felt in decades. She's not asking for permission, Charlotte. She's asserting the reality: we are the ones who need her. Charlotte froze mid-step, the words hitting harder than she expected. Need her, she repeated, disbelief evident. We are the Montgomerys. We built this company. Edward shook his head slowly. We built it on tradition, Charlotte. But tradition doesn't innovate. Tradition doesn't secure the future. Ava Johnson does. And if we don't recognize that, $900 million disappears before lunch. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Ava's team was already buzzing with activity. Marcus glanced at her, astonished by her calm demeanor. Did you see them? They were speechless. Even Edward Montgomery, he couldn't say a word. Ava leaned back in her office chair, fingers steepled, eyes focused on the skyline beyond her glass walls. That's the point, she said quietly. The Montgomerys are used to intimidation and compliance. I don't comply, I command respect. And sometimes, the only way to earn it is to make them realize what they stand to lose. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from the Montgomery board secretary. The family requests a follow-up meeting. They wish to reconsider. Ava smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. The storm she had ignited was beginning to work in her favor. By midday, Edward called a private conference with his inner circle. The room smelled of expensive cigars and tension, both acrid and suffocating. We underestimated her, one board member admitted reluctantly. She didn't just present numbers. She presented authority. And she's unshakable. Edward nodded slowly, a mixture of pride and frustration evident on his face. Yes. And the truth is, if we don't adjust our approach, we'll lose everything. Our legacy is meaningless if it can't evolve. She's forcing us to see what we've ignored for decades. Meanwhile, Charlotte was left seething, trapped in her own insecurities. How does she make us feel so powerless? She asked bitterly, pacing the floor. I've never felt like this in my life. Not even in front of the board, not even when negotiating billion-dollar deals. Who is she? She's everything we are not, Edward said quietly, almost a whisper. Everything we've ignored. Talent, vision, discipline, and integrity. And if we can't see that, we will lose not just this deal, but credibility, growth, and relevance. Across town, Ava convened her team to strategize. Let's prepare a detailed follow-up, she instructed. We've given them the opportunity to correct course. Our terms will remain firm, respect, cooperation, and implementation exactly as outlined. If they cannot meet that standard, the deal ends. Simple as that. Her words carried a calm finality that resonated with her team. Marcus leaned in, admiration clear. It's incredible how you flipped the entire narrative. They thought they were testing you. Instead, you tested them, and they failed. Ava's gaze softened slightly. It's not about failing them, Marcus. It's about protecting what we've built. We can't allow arrogance, ego, or ignorance to dictate outcomes. Respect and capability come first. Everything else comes after. Back at the Montgomery estate, the family huddled together in what felt more like a war room than a boardroom. Charts, graphs, and projections littered the table, but none of it mattered. They realized, with growing dread, that Ava wasn't just a CEO, she was a force of nature, unyielding, brilliant, and completely in control of her destiny. Edward finally spoke, voice tight but resolute. We'll follow her terms. Respect her, follow her plan. We'll do whatever it takes to secure the deal. Because losing her is not an option. Charlotte's jaw tightened, the sting of humility fresh and uncomfortable, but even she understood, Ava Johnson had already won. The fallout of her decisive action had sent shockwaves through their legacy, leaving them no choice but to acknowledge the power they had tried to dismiss. And as Ava reviewed her emails and checked on her team, a subtle smile played across her lips. She had turned disrespect into leverage, arrogance into opportunity, and mockery into recognition. The Montgomerys had been shaken, humbled, and, most importantly, made to understand that true power could not be bought, inherited, or faked. The turning point had passed. Now, the world would watch as Ava Johnson dictated the terms of the future, leaving the Montgomerys with a lesson they would never forget. The conference call with Montgomery Industries began at precisely 10 o'clock. Ava Johnson's office, bathed in morning light, reflected her calm authority. Marcus sat beside her, notebook open, pen poised, but the truth was, nothing could shake Ava now. The Montgomerys had sent a delegation, not to negotiate, but to plead for guidance, for leadership, for permission to continue. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Edward Montgomery cleared his throat, voice tight but respectful. Miss Johnson, after careful consideration, we realize we were wrong. We misjudged you. We underestimated your expertise, your vision, and your integrity. We want to follow your plan. We will cooperate fully. Ava allowed a small, satisfied smile to curve her lips. Edward, this is not about ego. It's about outcomes. I don't need respect for myself. I need respect for the work we've accomplished and the future we're building. If you can commit to that, we can proceed. If not, she let her words hang, the implication clear. Charlotte Montgomery, who was unusually quiet, finally spoke, voice soft and hesitant. Ava, I see now. I judged you too quickly. I let arrogance blind me. I understand now what leadership truly means. I apologize. Ava's gaze softened, and for the first time, the weight of tension lifted slightly. Thank you, Charlotte, she said warmly. Acknowledging mistakes is the first step toward growth. Respect, accountability, and courage, those are what build empires, not wealth or privilege alone. Marcus nudged her subtly, and Ava nodded. I have made my decision, she continued, tone firm but fair. Novalink Technologies will not merge under the current terms. I will cancel the $900 million deal. A gasp echoed on the other end of the call. Edward's face was pale, Charlotte's eyes wide. Wait, you're canceling? Edward asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. Yes, Ava said calmly. The deal will only proceed if mutual respect is guaranteed, if collaboration is real, and if your family understands that my company and my team will not be subjected to mockery, arrogance, or undermining behavior. Until that understanding exists fully, the deal is off. There was silence on the line, the weight of her words sinking in. The Montgomerys realized that their fortune was irrelevant if they refused to honor competence and integrity. Ava had taken control, not by force, but by principle. And yet, her decision was not only about power, it was about heart. Ava leaned back, voice softening. This is not just about business. It's about recognizing value where it exists, about learning humility, and about growing beyond what we think we deserve. If you can do that, we can achieve greatness together. If not, you will watch the opportunity pass and learn a lesson worth far more than $900 million. Charlotte's voice trembled, emotion breaking through her veneer. I never thought I'd feel humbled by someone I underestimated. Thank you, Ava. Truly. Even Edward's face softened. You've taught us something we should have learned long ago, he admitted. We've been blind, arrogant, and foolish. If you will allow us, we will meet your terms and learn to earn your respect rather than expect it. Ava allowed a faint smile. Then we have a path forward. But remember, respect is not given lightly, and it is never permanent. It is earned every day, in every action, in every decision. The conversation ended with an unusual warmth. What had begun as a tense power struggle had transformed into a moment of mutual understanding and growth. Ava closed her laptop and turned to Marcus, the weight of relief evident on both their faces. You did it, Marcus said softly. You turned mockery into respect, arrogance into accountability, and a $900 million challenge into a lesson they'll never forget. Ava nodded, her expression serene. Sometimes, the hardest victories are not the ones measured in money, but in integrity, courage, and the quiet confidence to walk away when the world underestimates you. Later, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows in her office, Ava gazed out at the city below. The skyline glimmered with possibility, reflecting the endless potential of hard work, resilience, and vision. She allowed herself a small, personal moment of satisfaction. She had stood firm, she had protected her team, and she had reminded the world that power without respect is meaningless. Her phone buzzed with messages from her team, congratulations, admiration, and even playful teasing. But Ava smiled at the screen, her heart light, knowing that the real victory had nothing to do with money or deals. It was about truth, dignity, and the courage to demand both. In that moment, Ava Johnson felt a quiet, heartwarming joy that went far beyond business. She had faced arrogance, mockery, and entitlement, and she had emerged not only victorious, but gracious. She had set a precedent, not just for the Montgomerys, but for herself, her company, and the world. Success is sweetest when it is earned with integrity, and respect is the currency that outlasts every dollar. Ava turned away from the window, a sense of peace settling over her. Today, she had not only canceled a $900 million deal, she had affirmed who she was, what she stood for, and the kind of leader the world would never forget. And that, she knew, was priceless.